My husband spent our savings on his mistress, so I took everything and ruined his life. I thought I had a good marriage. My husband Jason, 36M, and I had been together for nearly 10 years, and while we weren't perfect, I always believed we were solid. We worked hard, saved money, and had been planning for a future that I thought we were building together. Turns out the only future Jason was planning was one that didn't include me at all. I found out about the affair completely by accident. Jason had been acting weird for months, more distant, more secretive with his phone, and suddenly picking up random work trips that he never used to take. But the thing that really made me suspicious? Our savings account. We had been putting money aside for years, for a house, for travel, for emergencies. It wasn't a massive fortune, but it was our safety net. Except when I checked the balance one day, I nearly had a heart attack. Thousands of dollars were missing. At first, I thought it was a mistake, a bank error, maybe some kind of fraud. But when I pulled up the transactions, my stomach dropped. Hotel bookings, expensive dinners, jewelry stores, all made in cities Jason had never mentioned visiting. I felt sick. I didn't want to believe it, but the evidence was right there in front of me. My husband, the man I trusted with my entire life, was spending our savings on another woman. I wasn't angry at first. I was just numb. But then the rage hit me like a freight train. Jason thought he could spend my money on his mistress and get away with it? Oh, he had no idea what was coming for him. Gathering the evidence, I didn't confront him right away. I knew that if I exploded too soon, he'd just lie or try to manipulate the situation. So instead, I did what any rational woman would do. I played dumb and started collecting every piece of evidence I could find. First, I combed through our financial records. I took screenshots of every suspicious transaction, making note of the dates, locations, and amounts. Then I dug through our phone records. Jason wasn't smart enough to cover his tracks completely. He had been calling and texting this same number dozens of times a day. I saved everything. Then I went a step further. I hired a private investigator. I figured if Jason had been bold enough to use our savings on this woman, then there was more to the story. And I was right. Within a week, the investigator came back with solid proof. Photos of Jason with her. A blonde mid-20s, the type who looked like she survived off iced coffee and validation. The pictures showed them holding hands, kissing, laughing together. They looked like a real couple while I, his actual wife, was at home, clueless. I clenched my fists as I flipped through the photos. Jason had taken this woman on vacations. He had bought her jewelry and designer bags. He had rented out luxury hotel suites. With our money. It wasn't just cheating, it was stealing. And that's when I decided Jason wasn't just going to lose his mistress. He was going to lose everything. Setting the trap now that I had all the proof I needed, it was time to set him up for the fall of a lifetime. I started by meeting with a divorce lawyer, a damn good one. I laid out everything I had, and she was delighted. See, the fact that Jason had spent our shared savings on another woman worked heavily in my favor. Not only was I entitled to the majority of our assets, but I could also legally go after him for dissipation of marital funds, which basically meant he would have to pay me back for every dollar he wasted on his affair. But I wasn't done yet. Next, I opened my own bank account and quietly started moving money into it. Money I had earned, not money from our joint account, because I wasn't about to give him any ammo to use against me. I also canceled every credit card that had my name attached to it. If Jason wanted to keep spending on his little girlfriend, he was going to have to do it without my financial safety net. And then, the final step. I planned the perfect moment to confront him. Jason had another work trip coming up. A weekend getaway he had told me was for a conference. But thanks to my investigator, I knew exactly where he was going and who he was going with. So, while he was away, I set everything in motion. I packed up all of his belongings. I changed the locks. I met with our bank and removed his access to our accounts. And then, I had divorce papers delivered to his hotel. I wish I could have seen his face when the hotel staff handed him that envelope. The best part? The moment he opened it, he would have also seen the full dossier of evidence I had gathered. The photos, the transactions, everything. I didn't want there to be any room for denial. He had been caught red-handed, and now he was going to pay. But I wasn't done yet. I had one last move left to play, and it was going to be the thing that ruined him completely. Because Jason hadn't just cheated, he had mixed business with pleasure, and I was about to make sure that his boss found out everything. After I had the divorce papers and all the evidence delivered to Jason's hotel, I expected him to blow up my phone. But you know what? I got nothing. No texts. No calls. No furious emails demanding answers. At first, I thought maybe he was just processing everything, that maybe he was too shocked to respond. But then I realized the truth. Jason was too much of a coward to face me. Instead of coming home, he stayed at the hotel for the rest of the weekend, probably hoping I'd cool off before he had to deal with me. Maybe he thought he could sweet-talk his way out of it. Maybe he thought he could spin the situation and make me feel like I was overreacting. What he didn't know was that by the time he finally did come home, his entire life would already be ruined. While Jason was away screwing around with his mistress, I was making sure he had nothing left to come back to. I had already moved our money into an account under my name only. I had already changed all the locks so his key wouldn't work when he tried to slither his way back inside. But I wasn't stopping there. Next, I went to the bank and removed his name from every single shared account. Then, I met with my lawyer again to go over the next phase of the divorce. Since I had clear evidence that Jason had been spending our marital savings on another woman, the judge would have zero sympathy for him. He wasn't just losing me. He was going to lose the house, the majority of our assets, and any chance of walking away with a clean financial slate. But I wasn't done yet. Because Jason hadn't just used our money to cheat. He had used his company's money, too. Jason worked for a corporate finance company, one that was extremely strict about financial ethics. Employees weren't even allowed to accept free lunches from clients, let alone funnel company money into their personal expenses. And Jason had been stupid enough to pay for dates, flights, and hotel rooms with company reimbursements. So I sent an anonymous email to the company's HR and compliance department. I included detailed records of his transactions, showing that he had been mixing personal and company money to fund his work trips. I didn't even have to lie or exaggerate. Everything was right there in black and white. By the time Jason returned home, his access to company accounts had already been frozen, and he had a meeting scheduled with HR and upper management first thing Monday morning. He didn't know it yet, but he was about to be fired for financial misconduct. Jason finally came home late Sunday night. I was sitting in the living room drinking wine, waiting. I didn't even flinch when I heard him fumbling with his key, realizing the locks had been changed. Then came the pounding on the door. I took my time getting up, walked over, and slowly pulled the door open. Jason stood there, suitcase in hand, looking furious. "You changed the effing locks?" he snapped. I crossed my arms. "Yeah, that's what happens when you no longer live here." His face twisted in anger. "Are you kidding me? You seriously pulled this ST while I was gone?" I let out a dry laugh. "Oh, Jason, we're just getting started." I stepped aside just enough for him to see that his things were packed in boxes by the front door. His eyes widened. "You? You packed my stuff?" "Yup," I said, taking another sip of wine, "because you don't live here anymore." He stormed past me into the house, grabbing one of the boxes and ripping it open like he thought I had packed up his things as a joke. But the moment he saw his clothes, his electronics, his stupid golf clubs, he froze. He finally looked at me. "You're actually serious?" I nodded. "Dead serious." Jason ran a hand through his hair, his panic finally starting to set in. "Okay, look," he said, his voice shifting into fake calm mode. "I know you're upset, but can we just, I don't know, take a step back? Talk about this like adults?" I raised an eyebrow. "You mean like how you acted like an adult when you were spending our money on another woman?" Jason stood there, frozen, like he had finally realized how deep in he was. His usual smug arrogance, gone. The confidence he had when he thought he could cheat, steal, and still come home to his comfortable life, completely wiped from his face. He ran a hand down his face, exhaling sharply. "Look, I know I messed up, but throwing me out? That's extreme." I let out a dry laugh. "Oh, Jason, sweetheart, this isn't extreme. This is consequences." He tried again. "Let's just sit down and talk. We've been together for 10 years. That has to mean something to you." I tilted my head. "You know what else was 10 years? My savings account. The one you drained to impress your side piece." His jaw clenched. He had no defense for that. I took another sip of my wine, completely unbothered. "If you're done wasting my time, your stuff is packed. You can take it and go, or I can call the cops and let them escort you out." Jason looked around, desperate for some way to regain control, but there was none. He had lost. He just didn't fully know it yet. "Where am I supposed to go?" he muttered. I shrugged. "Not my problem." He gave a bitter laugh, shaking his head. "You're heartless," I smirked. "Says the guy who had zero issue blowing through our savings while lying to my face every day." Jason picked up one of the boxes, his movements jerky and frustrated. "Fine. If you want to throw away our marriage over one mistake, That's on you. I raised an eyebrow. One mistake? I gestured toward the printed bank statements sitting on the table. Because from what I counted, there were at least 64 different transactions that say otherwise. Jason turned red. You actually went through our finances? I laughed. Oh, honey, I went through everything. That's when it hit him. The divorce papers were one thing, but realizing that I had fully prepared for this moment, that I had already cleaned out our accounts, taken his name off everything, and ensured that he would leave with absolutely nothing, that was the real gut punch. And he hadn't even found out about his job yet. The moment it all came crashing down, Jason left that night, but he didn't go far. He spent the next 2 days texting me nonstop trying to negotiate. We should go to counseling before making any decisions. Let's just take a break and reevaluate. Do you really want to throw away 10 years together? Every single message was some variation of him trying to manipulate me, acting like I was being irrational for leaving him after he had spent thousands of dollars on another woman. I ignored every single one. Then, on Monday morning, I got the best message of all. Jason, what the F did you do? I grinned, because I already knew what had happened. While Jason was trying to figure out where to crash, he had no idea that I had already sent a full financial report to his company. And that morning, he walked into work, completely oblivious, only to be met by HR, his boss, and a folder full of evidence showing that he had been abusing company funds. Jason was a financial analyst. His entire job revolved around trust, ethics, and handling money properly, and he had been dumb enough to use company funds to help cover his affair. There was zero chance of talking his way out of this. By the time lunch rolled around, Jason was officially fired, and because his company was well respected in the industry, his name was basically blacklisted. His life falls apart, and I enjoy every second Jason tried to call me immediately, but I let it go to voicemail. Then another text popped up. Jason, you effing ruined my life. I smiled as I typed my response. Me. No, sweetheart, you did that all on your own. After that, Jason went radio silent. I didn't hear from him for a few weeks, but through mutual friends I got the updates. He was jobless, since no one in his industry wanted to hire him. His mistress left him immediately once she realized he had no money. He had to move into a cheap studio apartment because he couldn't afford anything else. Meanwhile, I was thriving. I didn't just take him for everything in the divorce. I flourished without him. I booked a solo vacation, bought myself something expensive just because I could, and for the first time in years, I felt free. Jason thought he could cheat and steal and still come out on top. Instead, he lost everything. A few weeks passed, and Jason finally stopped trying to contact me. At first, he had been furious, blaming me for ruining his life, sending pathetic texts about how I was being vindictive and cold-hearted. Then, when he realized I wasn't responding, he switched tactics, texting me long-winded messages about how much he missed me, how he wanted to fix things, how we could still work through this. I ignored every single one. The last message I ever got from him? Jason, I don't know how you can live with yourself after what you've done to me. I almost laughed. What I had done to him. I didn't force him to blow our savings on another woman. I didn't force him to lie to my face every day for months. I didn't force him to cheat, betray me, and throw away everything we had built together. That was all him. All I did was make sure he had to deal with the consequences. And speaking of consequences, Jason's life kept getting worse. After losing his job, Jason struggled hard. The industry he worked in was tight-knit, and because his firing involved financial misconduct, no one wanted to touch him. It didn't matter that he hadn't technically stolen from his company. Just the fact that he had misused company reimbursements was enough to blacklist him. He burned through what little money he had left within a few months. He downgraded from his sad little studio apartment to renting a room in someone's house. He tried working at a local car dealership, but got fired for being an arrogant asshole to customers. He kept bouncing from one low-paying job to another because no one wanted to hire a guy who was known for financial dishonesty. And the best part? His mistress was long gone. She had dumped him the second he lost his money, moving on to her next rich target. Jason had tried reaching out to her, but from what I heard, she blocked him immediately. He had thrown away a 10-year marriage for her, and she had left him the moment he wasn't useful anymore. Meanwhile, I was thriving. Once the divorce was finalized, I took everything I was entitled to. The house? Mine. The majority of our savings? Mine. No alimony for him, no financial support, no lifeline. He had gambled everything on the belief that I would be too weak, too broken to fight back. Instead, I had left him with nothing. And honestly, I had never been happier. I used some of the money I had won in the divorce to treat myself. a solo vacation, a brand new wardrobe, and a few expensive things that I had always wanted but never bought because I had been too busy being financially responsible for two people. I reconnected with old friends, went out more, started dating again. But this time, I was looking for someone who actually deserved me. Jason had thought he could upgrade when he cheated. Instead, he had downgraded so hard that he couldn't even afford to eat at the restaurants he once took his mistress to. And me, I had traded up in every possible way. I had peace, I had freedom, and most of all, I had zero regrets. Jason thought he could cheat, steal, and come out on top. Instead, he lost everything, and I never looked back.